One of the earliest comments on this channel asked me if I would do best to worst videos about a bunch of different artists, copying the style of Anthony Fantano, the Needle Drop, because obviously he's not going to get to every band. He's mostly going to cover bands that he holds in high regard, and there's some bands that I really care about that he probably won't get to. And one of the requested best to worst was, or worst to best rather, was for System of a Down, which interested me a lot because System of a Down is probably the band I've listened to the most in my life. Not necessarily of my own accord. My mom was the biggest System of a Down fan on planet fucking Earth from pretty much the year 2001 through 2008 or 9. So I've heard each of these albums literally hundreds of times from being in her car, because this was all we listened to for like years and years and years. So like I'm deeply, deeply, intimately familiar with the entire System of a Down catalog, including all of their B-sides and singles and everything that's not on the albums, but we're just going to be focusing on the 5 albums in this video, and I'm going to rank them from worst to best. We're going to get right down to it. By the way, if you've never listened to any System of a Down, I've gone ahead and put together a Spotify playlist of what I consider to be all their best songs, 5 or 6 songs per album, so 27 songs total. Check that out if you want to give them a listen and you haven't before. But let's dive right in, and I'm probably going to be controversial right off the bat here, because my least favorite System of a Down album is probably their most highly regarded, the one that shows up on people's charts and stuff when they recommend people System of a Down, but it's Toxicity. And this was the album that blew them up, and for good reason. This album has tons of great singles. It is a fantastic singles album. The song Chop Suey is probably the best known System of a Down song. You've probably heard it before, even if you haven't heard the band. Why don't they keep trust in my self-righteous suicide? That one. It's a beautiful song. It's got this very interesting dichotomy between the verses, which have these rapid fire, wake up, grab a brush and put a little makeup, I just got to find away the shake up, what do you think is about the table? And then it gets into this very beautiful melodic chorus, and it's, you know, switching between the heavier and lighter parts, but then where it really comes together is when it fuses the two, when the fucking pummeling main riff combines with the screaming, Father, 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 dear hands, I commend my spirit. And yeah, from there, it's just a big epic crescendo. It's a beautiful song. And yeah, that song is great. Toxicity is a good single. Another one that kind of mixes heavier and lighter parts. This one's more thoroughly sung and it has a big chugging breakdown at the end. It works really well. Soaring chorus, it'll stick in your head forever. You know, it's a good song. And even the last single, which not as many people remember, which was Aerials, is this really dark, brooding, sort of a pop dirge almost. Like, despite being a very effective like radio rock pop song, it's so like seedy, and that bass line just doom 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 doom, life is a waterfall. And this is one of the songs that does what a System of a Down does very well, which is to create big epic sounding songs in a very short time span. System of a Down has always had a power of, like, in just 3 minutes creating something that feels like a whole journey, starting off subtle and then blowing up bigger and bigger until hitting this huge fucking crescendo at the end. And this is a great example of a song that does that. Those aren't the only good songs on the album either. You've got Otwal, which is a similar dark song that reaches a climax, but this one's more sad and somber, and it's literally about like Charles Manson being in prison or something like that. And it's just about like not seeing the world and being there forever, you know, for your whole life. You know, it's another really good song. It does the same kind of effect well. I don't think it's as good as Aerials. And then there's a few songs that more fit with the template of the album, because these songs kind of stand out. These are all the sadder, more epic songs, and I think those are the ones that this album does the best, the like more poppy singles and shit, whereas most of the album is much heavier and much more pummeling and ruthless, and that works really well on the opening track, Prison Song, which has this great intro of just bah, they're trying to build a prison. Great intro to the album. It's a fun song. It's an interesting way to do like a politically charged song, because it's got Surge like literally just rattling off facts about the prison system, like like, like, drug money is used for recollections and transfers for responsible dictators around the world. They're trying to represent. It's really fun, and then it goes into the, I got my crack, my smack, my bitch right here in Hollywood. It's like, they're simultaneously doing, like, a very heavy-handed, political message. Like, they're really fucking just hardballing you with the politics, but mixing it up with these funny, kind of wacky sounds in order to keep it fresh and fun, and you want to listen to it. So, yeah, great way to do a political song. Unfortunately, where the album kind of falls apart is in that, other than those songs, the rest of it feels kind of fillery. And there's some songs that are a little bit more inventive. I think Science does a good job with having these sort of, like, this weird break in the middle to go into a more, like, Middle Eastern sound. There's a lot of, you know, Middle Eastern influence in System of a Down's music, and they'll break into sort of folksy stuff every once in a while. But, you know, that's good in Science. I think that's a pretty good okay song. You got stuff like Bounce. Well, no, that's not a good example. Oh, Psycho. Psycho has a cool, like, in the middle. Really fun stuff. Again, not the most memorable song, but I do think it's got some cool bits to it. And the ending, after the song Aerials, there's this, like, this funeral chant song that plays, which is like a traditional Armenian funeral dirge that just plays at the end of the album, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty memorable, especially just being there at the end of what is otherwise a metal album, essentially. But you can definitely feel that the band was trying to capture some of that emotion on this album, that it's supposed to be this kind of dark and heavy, like, funeral dirge of an album, except that the tone is kind of all over the place, in spite of the fact that the guitar tone is very stagnant, and that's my big issue with this album. It all kind of sounds the same. Every song has the same pummeling, chugging riffs that, like, it's just like a constant and it all sounds like very, you know, high up on the guitar. Just, like, it's not heavy enough to be, like, a good metal album, but, like, it gets tiring. The songs are just too samey, which is something that System of a Down's not known for. Most of their albums have tons of variety, tons of experimentation, and this one, particularly in the early songs, just hits you with so much sameness. Like, right after Prison Song, which is a good pummeling heavy song, you get Needles, which is another pummeling heavy song, though at least this one has a really goofy subject matter, and the chorus, pull the tapeworm out of your ass. There's a little noodly section where Darren sings, like, I'm sitting in my room with a needle in my hand. That part's cool. That's one of the better songs. But then, right from there, you go into Jet Pilot, which is just jigga 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 for half the time. Then you get to X, which is, I can't even, no, I'm thinking of Shimmy. Shimmy's later on the album. X is the one that's like, fuck, I can't even remember how it goes. That's how forgettable X is. It's the most forgettable song on, like, any System of a Down album by far. And these are early in the album, so, like, right at the start, you get this long string of just, like, bigga jigga 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 all the way until you hit Chop Suey, and then it just totally changes the tone of the album. Like, up until that point, it's just heavy, 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 and then all of a sudden, Chop Suey is this big, epic, meaningful song. So it, you know, it just feels like you're mired in this sameness at the beginning. Deer Dance is also towards the beginning. Deer Dance at least has a kind of nice little soft breakdown. Like, oftentimes they put in a soft section, and that's nice. It's a little more dark and mysterious. I like the tremolo sort of, folk guitars on Deer Dance, but otherwise the songs, like, that part is great. The rest of it's not that interesting, you know. And then right after Chop Suey, it's immediately followed by Bounce, which is just a super chuggy song, but it's a goofy one because it's going like bounce pogo 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 over jigga 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 jigga. It's funny. It's a fun thing. But, you know, I just don't think, I just feel like it's so much more of the same, and we're gonna see on other System of a Down albums how they do lots of these really short, goofy songs. Like, every album has at least one, if not two, of these, like, shorter, fun, like, wacky songs with hilarious lyrics that are usually sexually charged, and they're some of the most fun songs on their albums, but this one, I think, is probably my least favorite of all of those, of all their goofy short songs. You know, you've got songs like Forest, which kind of is like a, I don't know, an adventure in a way. This was like my favorite song by them when I was a kid, but listening to it now, I'm just not that impressed with it. It's got a pretty big chorus on it, but I don't know. It's not super memorable. It doesn't stick with me the way that a lot of these other songs do. So yeah, Toxicity is my least favorite. I still think it's a good album. I would give it a 6 out of 10. I think the singles carry it, and like if you cut it down to just the essential songs, it's really good. But again, the biggest problem with it is that I think it's too consistent, which is funny because later down the line we'll get to a release which is all the songs they cut from Toxicity, and you really see where they like went out of their way to make Toxicity uniform. They really tried to make it like, I don't know, almost a concept album. But again, I think it suffers for the fact that while the sound is consistent across the album, the tone jumps all over the place. I think it could have done better with maybe having like more of a progression of tone across the thing instead of just occasionally suddenly diving into these really emotional songs in the middle of what is otherwise just like a bunch of fucking nu metal, you know? Yeah, anyway, I've said plenty about it. Let's move on to the next one. So from here on out, all of the System of a Down albums I like a good bit. I would give them all at least an 8 out of 10. These are all very solid albums, but the least solid of the 4 I would have to give to Mesmerize, which is part 1 of the 2-part album Mesmerize and Hypnotize. They released about 6 months apart, and you could combine them into one album, and there's definitely like a narrative thread across the two, though I do think that Mesmerize is a little bit more like off the wall. It's a little more all over the place in its sound, whereas Hypnotize feels much more cohesive and conceptual. But nonetheless, Mesmerize has some fantastic songs, and it has some of the most experimental System of a Down songs. When you look at their career, really, their first album is like a highly experimental album, but it's still in like this nu metal and sort of hardcore punk sound. Like they're taking that sound and they're doing interesting things with it, but it's very much that sound. Then you get to Toxicity and it's very nu metal. But then from there on out, System of a Down really becomes its own animal. They have a sound that's really hard to define. I can't really pigeonhole it into any one category. And Mesmerize is where that really comes into its own and becomes like, this is the System of a Down unique noise that no other band can imitate. And you see this best with BYOB, this song that is really about these effortless changes between super fucking heavy metal parts and dance grooves. And the song does this like seamlessly. It just keeps going from kneeling roses disappearing into Moses' dry mouth over a fucking blast beat to suddenly, then you feed us lies from the tablecloth. Like, that's magical. It's such a seamless transition. I can't even believe it. It's a really fun song. I do think this song maybe could have been shorter, but I feel like they just felt like they'd won the lottery so hard with the concept of it that they let it run. They let it run the full course of what it could do, and I don't blame them. It's a pretty good song. It was a great single from the album, and really memorable imagery in its lyrics, like kneeling roses disappearing into Moses' dry mouth, for instance. I should mention, System of a Down lyrics always very, very oblique and strange. Some of them can be direct, like, again, Prison Song, where they're like literally making a political statement. Most of them are much more like about imagery and like metaphors and stuff like that, even when the metaphors are about something silly, like when we get to the song Vicinity of Obscenity, which is about masturbation, but using only like you know, uncommon what's the word I'm looking for? Euphemisms. Anyway, Mesmerize goes from the awesome BYOB into some other really heavy but fun songs. Cigaro is a particularly, like, whacked out fucking, like, heavy ass song where the chorus is, my cock is much bigger than yours, my cock, you walk right through the door. Fucking hilarious, but then it's met with these like insane, like borderline blast beat parts where they're screaming, where the regulators that dereg. Every line in this is a hook. Like every line in Cigaro will stick in your head. It's just this really ripping, fun, heavy fucking song that tears the walls off your fucking house. Then you get to Radio Video, and this is perhaps the most fun experimental track of System of a Down, where it starts off as like a heavier song, but one with like a dancey groove where they're saying like, hey man, look at me rocking out, I'm on the radio. And then it goes into these just long musical passages with them just sort of singing over it like nonsense, and there's this great guitar solo. It's a really fun dancey song. When they play this song live, they always like turn it into a dance party. It's really cool. It's one of the most memorable System of a Down songs for sure. And then another song I really love from this album is Lost in Hollywood. So this one goes in an interesting trajectory because the early tracks are much heavier, but also all of them goofy. Every track in the early part of the album is really goofy. Then we get into some of the more serious stuff, like what was on, like what the best songs were on the previous album. I don't think any of them lives up to those songs. We've got Question, which is pretty okay. We have Violent Pornography is more of like a fun pop song. It's pretty good. It's a very System of a Down song, but not one of their strongest offerings, I don't think. It's sort of like a built for radio almost kind of feel. But where the album gets really interesting is with the last two tracks, which kind of go in a totally new direction. You've got Old School Hollywood, which is a really cool song that mixes like electronic dance sounds into this pummeling heavy metal song with very odd lyrics about a time that Darren Malakian went to an all-star baseball game, like just like a bunch of Hollywood all-stars, and like it was really shitty and everyone was an asshole, and so he wrote a song about it, and it's really fun. But then the album ends on this gigantic ballad, Lost in Hollywood, which is corny as fuck and way over the top and genius. I think it's a really fantastic song because it's clearly tongue-in-cheek, and System of a Down lyrics always have a sense of humor about them, and really they have almost two senses of humor that merge and melt into each other, because Serge's sense of humor is much more absurd. He likes weird lingual jokes and tongue twisters and like just stuff that sounds funny, but seems like it might have a deeper meaning, whereas Darren is much more into like the hit you in the face with what he's saying and like edgy, abrasive stuff. And if you listen to each of their solo work, you really see those senses of humor come out. But in System of a Down's work, they kind of coalesce, and I think Lost in Hollywood's a good example of a song where like it feels like a midpoint between the two. It's obviously more of a Darren song with the focus on California and Hollywood and stuff like that, but this song is really corny in a really good way. It's a self-aware corny, and I really like it. The middle of the album, I mean, this thing has, like I said, a lot of good, interesting sounds. Not every experiment works as well. Revenge is another like goofy, heavy song, but I don't think it's as memorable as the other ones. This Cocaine Makes Me Feel Like I'm on This Song is just a fun, goofy one. Just like that's the short, fun, goofy song of this album. It's all right. It's not as good as the best of them. I think the worst song on this album is probably Sad Statue, which is unfortunate because the chorus is great. It's got a really memorable hook, but surrounding the chorus is just some verses that don't stand out, not a lot of good instrumentation. The song's kind of janky in the way it's composed. It switches gears much less smoothly than a song like BYOB, so... and I also have to give a shout out to the opening track Soldier Side, which is this cool, mysterious little intro that works really well, not only for setting the tone for the album and transitioning super well into BYOB, but then it's also reprised in the final song of Hypnotize, which is a big, epic version of the same. It's a really good bookend to the album. Like, Soldier Side across these two albums is a fucking perfect bookend. So, yeah. Again, Mesmerize, really good album. It's only 11 tracks, and I would say that BYOB and Radio Video are probably the only ones that I think stand up with the best System of a Down songs. Like, they are top tier, in the same way that something like Chop Suey is, or fucking, of course I erased my notes for Toxicity after finishing it, so I guess Toxicity would be another example. But yeah, those two are top tier songs, but the other ones are all kind of anywhere from like pretty good to yeah, I like it, you know, but none of them are like amazing songs. None of them are terrible. They're all just kind of in the middle, and that's why I don't put this as high up as some of the other albums that will be coming up on this list. Okay, I just took a break for a couple hours. I don't know where the hell I was. I think I did Toxicity, I did Mesmerize. So the next one on my list is the self-titled. The first System of a Down album is my third favorite. I think this is a very strong album. These top three are all really strong. They're definitely my three favorites, and the ones that I come back to more often than the other albums, or that I see myself coming back to well into the future. The self-titled System of a Down album is very much of its time. It sounds like an album of 1998. It sounds like it came out in this period where we were getting this transition from grunge to nu metal with these heavier bands that were coming out, you know, but System of a Down was a band that was doing a lot more unique shit than the other bands in the genre at the time. They were taking the sound in a very different direction. And there was definitely a heavy influence of like hardcore punk on this album. I would even say that this is like, it's more punk than metal almost in some places, even though it does have very heavy moments. But more than anything, it's fun. It's a fun experimental album that, while using a very bare bones band, it's just, you know, bass guitars, drums, and vocals. There's no like other instruments on this album the way that there would be on like all of the upcoming System of a Down releases once they had the money to throw around to you know, have higher budget productions. They did so much with just that basic sound, and like they're so inventive with the different ways that they'll take it, especially Serj Tankian's vocals. I feel like he was the most experimental with his vocals on this album. Serj has always been known for the fact that he has a huge range. He can do all kinds of voices. He can do, you know, guttural growls. He can do high-pitched singing. He can do wacky, fun voices, and he does all of that, especially on this album, which is a big part of what makes it such a fun time and like such a unique experience. This album doesn't take itself seriously in the slightest, which is a huge advantage it has over a lot of nu metal stuff that comes off as so self-serious and edgy that it can be difficult to listen to. Something like Disturbed, where you're just like, really, guy? You know, a little bit. This band, System of a Down, did not take themselves seriously at all, and were just in it for a good time, but while still saying something meaningful along the way, with some deeply political songs on this album as well. So yeah, it's an interesting bag of tricks that they've brought out here, and this is the album I think that most you can see a legacy in the form of Maximum the Hormone. If you listen to the Japanese band Maximum the Hormone, like, I feel like they took the sound of this album, combined it with a little bit of mindless self-indulgence, and like expanded on it and went in their own direction with it. And you know, they sort of picked up where this album left off in a way that I don't think the next System of a Down album did. Like, I really think everything after this point sounds more like each other than they do like this album. But anyways, so the strongest tracks on here, we have the huge single Sugar, which is a massive riff. Just the bass and guitar riffs in the song are extremely memorable. The do 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 sugar, you can hear this song once, you will never forget it. It will be stuck in your head for the rest of your life. You'll keep thinking sugar, and then the fucking Pummeling Chorus, which is, this is the ultimate jump up and down song. The way this chorus is written, it's still that same guitar and bass riff, but like played much heavier, and Serj going, the kombucha mushroom people setting up round all day. This song was built for jumping up and down, which of course is all anyone does if you see it live, including the band. Everyone's jumping. But I think the most impressive thing about this particular song is the breakdown section. So songs of this era always had, like, they would go verse, chorus, and then there'd be, like, the strip everything back and do, like a quieter section that builds up to the final chorus. You can see it with something like Limp Bizkit. I'm like a chainsaw, I skin your ass raw, and if my day keeps going this way, I just might break your fucking face tonight, which is a pretty good one. Then you've got the nightmare of the Disturbed song, Down with the Sickness, with the "No, mommy, don't hit me again, don't hit me again, I'll be a good boy." But System of a Down had one of the best with the Sugar one, where it's, boom, here I sit, in my desolate room, no lights, no music, just a girl, boom, I've killed everyone, I'm away forever, but I'm feeling better. How do I feel? What do I say? Fuck you, it all goes away. It's this combination of really edgy, aggressive shit where he's saying, like, you know, I've killed everyone, and fuck you, it all goes away, but then mixed in with this goofy voices and the, you know, no lights, no music. So yeah, again, they're keeping it, they somehow tap into that primal nu metal aggression without ever being up their own ass about it. It's always fun. It's always a good time. It's always self-aware. And the first few tracks are all very much in that vein. You've got Sweet Pea, which is a great opener. It's got a really cool riff that it starts the song with. It's another fun song that's got some religiously charged lyrics. It also has a great breakdown segment. All three of the first songs have a great breakdown segment in them. You get No, which is one of my favorite songs on the album, track 2, which does this thing where it's sort of the heavy light thing that they would do a lot of on their later albums, but with a less of a gigantic jump between the two. But the verses are kind of a dance, like a Middle Eastern sounding dance beat. You know, it's like, oh, because we all live in the valley of the walls, and you kind of dance around, and then you'll never think you don't do. Good stuff. With a nice breakdown in the middle once again. Then the album goes into a sort of second section where those first 3 songs are all that kind of jumpy, fun, energetic nu metal punk sound. Then we go into a more like serious and I feel like this is where the band was building towards the sound that they would really nail on Chop Suey, of like that more ethereal, serious and weighty sound. And they first attempted on Suggestions, which Suggestions is like an odd combination because the lyrics are goofy and some of the vocal delivery is like really goofy, where there's a part where he's going, the ships are multiplying day after day, sir, and they're coming close to the shore, sir. And I don't know what the hell's up with that voice, but the way the song is played is like heavy and dissonant and dark. This song is one of my least favorite on the albums, partly because the way it starts with these acoustic melodies is really jarring with the songs you've just heard. You've gone through like 3 hardcore punk songs, then all of a sudden we completely switch gears into a more serious sounding song, and I just don't think that the hooks work that well, because it just goes into like a heavy guitar sound that sounds nice, but there's no good vocal presence to back it up, really, and the song just kind of falls flat. It's structurally weird. It doesn't have like a big enough moment in it. The next track is much better at doing the same kind of thing, which is Spiders, and this is, again, one of their darker, more atmospheric songs. This one has a huge, epic build-up to a gigantic climax, very cinematic song, and again, very of its time, though. Like, they would do this style of song many other times, but this particular song sounds very late 90s. It's sort of like the Cranberries, like Zombie or something, like that sort of, you know, just after grunge sound. But it's really nice. I like the song a lot, and, you know, I don't know, I guess I'd say that they did songs of equal quality on future records. Chop Suey's the only one in this style that I think, like, exceeds Spiders. Spiders is still a really good song. I think it could have been a little longer, possibly, just to draw out the feeling a bit more, but it's still cool. That's followed up with a very fun, another one of the, like, little 1-minute chipper songs, which is De Devil. This one is, like, the most hardcore punk sounding song on the album. This one, like, would not sound off on a hardcore punk album, I think, but it's punchy, it's fun, it's got cool lyrics. Still not like with all these like 1-minute fun songs, like they're usually not the most memorable on the album, but they are a good like mix up. They change up the feel so that it's not all too serious. They tend to come after the most serious song, like on the first 2 albums. Both of them are like right after the most serious track you get this, and even going all the way to Hypnotize, where fucking right after Holy Mountains is Vicinity of Obscenity. So yeah, it still happens throughout their albums that they always put their goofy, wacky track right after a super serious one. I guess just to snap you back into the tone for the rest of the album in a really quick way. Then we get to the mid part of the album, which has some pretty okay songs. I would say Soil is a track that starts off kind of clumsy, but it hits its stride heavily towards the end, and the lyrics are very emotional. It's about, like, the loss of a friend, and it's got these very, like, dismal feelings to it. Like, it's sort of this nostalgic memory of a person you loved who was sort of lost, and it ends with this really vicious part where the music cuts out and Serge just screams, "Why the fuck did you take him away from us, you motherfucker?" And the music all crashes in, and it's a great moment. It's a great visceral anger. You know, so overall a pretty okay song. Then there's the song War, which is sort of a catchy, heavy, like pop metal song in a way, that something that would have definitely gotten some airplay. Except for the fact that there's a weird section in the middle where for a full minute it goes into like a lower key, like mysterious dun 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 dun, and then Serge is doing like a spoken word poem sort of, where he's saying like, "We must call upon our bright darkness, beliefs that the bullets of the wicked, one was written on the sword." This section is one that really, like, depends on my mood. If this song comes on and I'm playing it loud and I get excited about this song and I can, like, theatrically act it out, "The call of the righteous man needs a reason to kill a man," then it's awesome. If I'm just trying to, like, casually listen to this album, this section can be a bit of a drag because you're going through, like, this yeah, and then you hit that moment and it kind of snags it a little bit, but you know, still a cool song. I'm really glad it exists. I'm glad that they were willing to do something as risky as that. Then things get really risky when they do the song Mind, which is 6 minutes long. Mind you, almost nothing else on this album is over 3 minutes, and this song comes out of nowhere and is 6 minutes long. And I love it. This song goes in a lot of bizarre directions. It's clearly influenced by, like, more experimental rock, something like a Mr. Bungle, or, like, you know, which are some of the influences of System of a Down, Frank Zappa, and shit like that. The song has all these different moving parts, where it starts off with this long, slow tension build, then it gets into, like, a fun bit, and then it gets into a heavy bit, and then it gets into just a whacked out bit. It's very druggy, and I think all of it's really cool. I think it works surprisingly well. I didn't like the song as a kid because it was too much for me, but you know, as time's gone on, I've really come to appreciate this track. So that song really kind of divides this album into different parts, and I really think Mind is almost, if not for the fact that the last track, Pluck, like, is much more in the style of the first few songs on the album, and is a very strong closer. Mind kind of feels like the emotional climax of the album. After that point, it's more just like filler-y stuff. I think Peephole's an okay song. Peephole is one that's sort of got this carnival sound to it, like a wacky big top thing. It's alright. It's a pretty okay song. It's got some catchy hooks, and I really like the chord progression in the background. It's kind of this doomy chord progression. It's an okay song, but then we get into two of the worst songs that System of a Down ever put out, Qbert and Darts. These two tracks are completely unmemorable. They've really got nothing going for them. The chord progression is almost the exact same across both of them. They're just not at all memorable, and they really feel like they were stuffed into the back end of the album to get it up to 40 minutes. You know, these are two short tracks that I can barely even remember what they sound like, and I listened to this album a couple hours ago. So yeah, they are definitely the black spot on this album. Like, if not for those two songs, I would be tempted to put this above the next album on my list, but just the fact that there are any weak tracks on this album puts it below the other two, which don't really have any weak tracks. So Yeah. But otherwise very strong, and the final track, fucking Politically Lying Unholy Cowardly Killers, is a massive anthemic song about just the fucked system, and it's kind of an origin story song for System of a Down, because it's a song about the Armenian genocide, which is something that this band is deeply, deeply involved in talking about. All of the band members are Armenian. They have been like a major part of different like activist concerts and stuff like that, and like fundraisers to try to support to basically get reparations for the Armenian genocide that has not been acknowledged by most of the world, and they've been trying to open up people's eyes about it, and Pluck is entirely about that, and it's about the System of a Down. Like, that's the last lyric of the song, is all in a system down. Which the band name was originally from a poem that Darren had written called Victims of a Down, which they changed the system because it was more, you know, it was more likely to get popular. So yeah, this is a strong album, a great mission statement for the band. It kind of covers all the different like lyrical topics that they would get into. It's fun. It's really experimental. I just wish that there was tightened up in places. I think that having Qbert darts and suggestions as all like some of the weakest System of a Down songs that have ever come out really hampers this otherwise great album. But yeah, still worth a listen, of course. So my last two are very close. These were like neck and neck decision. I wasn't even sure exactly which one I wanted to pick, but in the end I had to go with my heart, pick the one that I've always considered my favorite. But both of these are like strong 8 to a light 9 albums. These are both fantastic albums with almost no weak points on them. The next one on my list, the one I'm going to list as my number 2 favorite System of a Down album, is Steal This Album. Now, Steal This Album is fascinating because it was built out of a bunch of unused tracks from Toxicity, which of course is, you know, the big successful album that came out in 2001, and basically a whole shitload of demos got leaked online. They were being leaked as Toxicity 2, but they were mixed in with all kinds of other shit, like other unreleased tracks, B-sides, songs from soundtracks that the band had worked on. So like all these System of a Down songs were just floating around on the internet, and I was very familiar with them because my mom had downloaded all these songs and we had burned them all into 2 CDs, and we probably listened to those more than the actual albums because there was so much variety. And I really think that System of a Down's personality as a band came out in this period through these albums, because their first 2 albums are pretty cohesive. You know, the first one all has this kind of again, hardcore punk and nu metal sound, and while that one's more experimental than Toxicity, you know, Toxicity is all locked into this one very particular sound. Then you get all these tracks that are totally different, that go in all these different directions, that really play with the System of a Down sound. And, you know, hearing those made it feel like this was a band who could do almost anything. They were so versatile. And, you know, hearing all these songs put together on an album and Steal This Album really makes it like, wow, System of a Down was so much more than the sound that they were portraying on Toxicity. And I really think that on Hypnotize and Mesmerize, while those albums are like cohesive albums, they still brought that experimental flavor that they had developed in this mid-period. Like, they didn't shy away from adding all those weird elements back into a complete album experience the way that they had on Toxicity. So Steal This Album, in spite of the fact that it is very much a collection of tracks, it's kind of just a hodgepodge mishmash of random shit the System of a Down had put out, all of it's good. Every single song is good, and all of them are completely different from one another, which really makes them entertaining and interesting, and, like, all of them are memorable because they're so different, and unlike Toxicity, where there's like 5 or 6 tracks that I could completely skip and I would not miss them at all. On this album, if you skip anything, it's a whole sound you're missing out on. So, you know, that's the biggest strength of Steal This Album. The biggest weakness of Steal This Album is that no one song on here is like a huge single in the way that like Chop Suey is, or Sugar is, or BYOB is, or, you know, a lot of the songs that I'm going to talk about on Hypnotize. But you know, nonetheless, there are tons of really solid songs. It opens with Chicken Stew, which is this batteringly heavy song about, like, the fridge being left open and all the random stuff that's in the fridge, seemingly. And it goes in an interesting direction. It's, again, doing kind of the hard, soft thing, but, oh, I haven't mentioned this yet, but one of the things I really love about System of a Down is that they do a lot of syncopated vocals with the drum. Like they'll syncopate the guitars and drums and the vocals. So in this song, it goes, need therapy, therapy, advertising causes, need therapy, therapy, advertising causes, therapy, every day, advertising causes. They've done that a few times on the first two albums, and I always like it, and this is one of the most notable examples. It works really well. It's just a cool thing that they do that's very, very System of a Down to do. That's followed up by Inner Vision, which is another one of these, like, really huge, like, spacious riffs and a song that builds into an epic climax. Again, they were so good at, like, 2-minute and 50 songs that start heavy and then end in, like, a huge operatic crescendo, you know? And this one has a really great part where he's screaming, "It's never too late to reinvent the bicycle, the force and George energy, I was giving you force!" It's a fun track. Then we've got, probably the most solid single on the album, which is Boom, which is one of their more direct political songs where Serge is just kind of ranting about all this shit that's fucked up about the world before going into a chorus where he just screams, "Boom! Boom! 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 Every time you drop the bomb, you kill the god your child has born." It's solid stuff. It's a very emotionally charged political song, and I really like the way that the first verse is sort of soft spoken, and then the second verse he's like yelling out the lyrics before hitting you at the big chorus again. It's a dope song. You got the punk sound really comes back in a big way on songs like Fuck the System, which is just this really fun beating you over the head song. War, fuck the system, war, fuck the system, fuck the system. It's, you know, once again, politically charged, but funny. Similarly, the song 36, which is like a blast beat with Serge screaming, "Television is disgrace, life you get old, it's the race." And then these little, like, parts in the middle. It's cute, and it's literally 36 seconds long. So I love that track. But I think the most interesting thing that gets introduced on this album is straight up ballads. So System of a Down had songs like Chop Suey, which are ballad-ish. You know, they're emotional songs. They have a lot of gravity to them, but they're still heavy. They're still, like, big and muscular tracks. This album has the first couple of songs that are straight up, like, soothing and not really heavy at all from System of a Down. First, you have Ego Brain, which has these really gorgeous, like, hand-picked acoustic guitars that, like, there's like a folk melody through this song. And when the verse starts, there's no chugging guitars or anything. They're just softly singing, "Life is but a dream, drifting on a stream, longingly it seems, all of what remains." And then the guitars kick in for the chorus, but it's never, like, chugging, you know? It's really soft and quite gorgeous. And then later on the album, there is a straight-up acoustic ballad in the form of the song Roulette, but the lyrics are gripping, and Serge's incredible vocals really get to shine on this track. Really, Serge and Darren's. Like, both of them are fantastic singers. Like, all of the goofy voices aside, all of the fun, experimental screaming and shit aside, they can really sing, and that comes through beautifully on this particular song. And then there's just lots of other good stuff. Bubbles is fine. New Guns is interesting. And one of my favorite things about this album is that because I'm so familiar with the demos, there's a few songs where they changed the chorus, and you can still, like, in your head hear the original. So what I would always do as a kid is listen to this album and sing the original choruses over the new ones, which is a really cool effect, because System of a Down would later do a lot of that. They would do a lot of vocal layering on Mesmerize and Hypnotize, where, you know, they'd put Darren singing one thing and Serge singing another thing on top of him. I want to say they first did that somewhere on Toxicity. I don't remember where. and then it really starts to become a thing later on. Hypnotize does it like the most, and I'm a huge fan of that kind of vocal layering of two different choruses being sung at the same time, so it's fun to do that over this particular album. You've got their more well-known songs from this album, Mr. Jack, which is this like sort of sludgy, doomy, grungy song about fucking being on the side of the freeway dealing with the fucking cops, man, and it's got a great build-up over the course of the song. Really weird Dadaist lyrics songs like I-E-A-I-A-I-O, where Serge just seems to be inventing tongue twisters, like meeting John at Dale's Jr. with deny a pointed finger, meeting John at Dale's Jr. with deny a pointed finger, why? A former cop undercover just a shot never covered, former cop undercover just a shot never covered, why? Fighting crime with a partner, Lois Lane and Jimmy Carter, fighting crime with a partner, Lois Lane and Jimmy Carter, woo 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 woo. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I like it a lot. Every song on here is cool. There's nothing bad. You know, not all of them are equally memorable. Streamline is a great closing song that was from the Scorpion King soundtrack, and as far as I can tell is about the Scorpion King, but I'm not sure. But it's another one that like starts big and gets giant by the end. So yeah, I have no complaints about Steal This album. I think it's really solid. Every song is fun. Again, none of them are like the greatest song in the world, but all of them are nothing I've ever heard before, and very distinctly System of a Down. And I think this is like where their personality shines the most. And last but the opposite of least, because it's my favorite System of a Down album, is Hypnotize. This was kind of a close one with Steal This Album, just because Steal This Album is much longer at 16 tracks, Hypnotize is only 12, but this has so many of my favorite System of a Down songs on it, and I wasn't sure about it when I was listening to it back, because it's kind of backloaded, which is rare for a System of a Down release. I would say Toxicity is pretty backloaded too. In fact, Toxicity is extremely backloaded, because the first half of the album has a bunch of shit in it, but most of their albums are more front-loaded. In this case, though, God, this album starts good and becomes great over the course of its run. Hypnotize is probably the most cohesive album by System of a Down. It's the one that most feels like conceptual, and it all flows into each other extremely well. Mesmerize and Hypnotize are meant to be a double album, and if you listen to them both all the way through, it's fine, but Mesmerize feels like much more of a mixed bag, and Hypnotize is all cohesive all the way through. It starts off with Attack, which is just fucking intense. It sounds like an attack. It sounds like what the title says. It's like blast beats and chugging guitars and crazy shit before getting into this like softly sung part, but with this constant like tick-tock drum happening in the background that keeps the tension up even while they're doing something more melodic and sensitive before coming back in with the fucking attack. Very memorable hook on this song. Then we get into Dreaming, and this is where I need to talk about the production. Now, if you haven't seen my video, Fuck Rick Rubin, I highly recommend watching that one, because Rick Rubin produced all of the System of a Down albums, but over time, Rick Rubin has turned into a shitty producer. He was a very influential and important guy back in the day, but these days, his production style is turn everything all the way up, sounds fine to me. And Hypnotize and Mesmerize really suffer for their production. They sound really muddy and compressed. They sound like they were made for cell phone speakers. There's just this constant like grain and fuzz from the overcompression. The albums sound terrible, and it kind of hurts Mesmerize even more, because that album has even more cacophonous songs, like even more loud, abrasive, attacking songs. But the song that always comes to mind when I want to complain about it is Dreaming, because Dreaming is the song that most utilizes the vocal layering I talked about. And I love the vocal layering bits, because it's Serge singing like a longer melody where it's like, whoa, created indigenously, and meanwhile under that he's also like doing a fast spoken word thing. It's like, we make it through the generation of bottled water, and both are really memorable, and it's fun to like pick one and sing that. What me and my mom would do in the car is like, she would always sing the soaring part, and I would sing the repetitious part for the first half of the verse, and then we'd swap for the second half, and then we'd sing Darren and Serge harmonize on the chorus, but they harmonize in a way where they're both singing different melodies, so I guess it's not even harmonizing. Like, they're singing the same lyrics, but in a different melody, and it's really cool. and we would sing along to that. I love the song. However, the two vocal melodies, both at max volume, over a really loud instrumental, a chaotic instrumental, is painful to listen to. This song will hurt your ears, and you get this little respite in the middle, like this little break to take a, oh god, okay, they're doing a melodic thing, and then it just goes right back in. It's a bit much. I wish this was one of my favorite songs, but the production really hurts it. We go from there into Kill Rock and Roll, which is another really fun song, a very Darren song, because it's about killing all your favorite rock stars and stuff. And it's got an odd break in the middle where he just starts singing about everyone being on drugs. And like, this is also where I think System of a Down started to have more of an amalgam sound on this record. Like, each track kind of feels like multiple songs in one, almost in a mindless self-indulgence kind of way, where a track will have, like, the verses kind of sound like one song, and then the chorus kind of sounds like another song, and then the breakdown sounds like a totally different song. And this is the first case where that really becomes apparent, where Darren starts singing, "Eat all the grass that you want, accidents happen in the dark." And I've heard from my mom that this, like, he used to just play that at shows. Like, in between songs, he might just start strumming his guitar and singing "Eat all the grass that you want, accidents happen in the dark." And now that's showed up here. So, like, I think that some of this was just like a pastiche of different things that they had come up with over the years, all getting combined into a song. And it's really cool because it means the song takes you on all these different adventures. You know, you're listening to one song, suddenly it's another song, and they're both good songs. It's neat. It's like hidden gems in the middle of the lyrics. I dig that sound a lot. Then we get to the single Hypnotize, which has a very, very memorable guitar riff, great guitar solo, like an acoustic guitar solo. I don't know if it's actually played acoustically, but it sounds like it, and it's really nice. It's got very memorable lyrics and imagery. Yeah, it's a cool song. It's one of the more straightforward System of a Down songs. Like, this one is just kind of a pop rock song, but it's really solid. And I sampled it on my rap song Quarter. So if you've heard my song Quarter, you've heard Hypnotize. After that's one of my personal favorite System of a Down songs, Stealing Society, which is this really interesting mix of a song. And I think this is the ultimate, like, you can really see Serge versus Darren in this song, because Serge's part that he's singing is like this poetic track about two skies fighting each other and two suns falling out, and like it's this like really high-minded sounding, like fucking spiritual like lyrics. And then that's happening with these very sunny guitars that I like a lot. I really love the overall sound of this song. It's not even heavy at all, really. Like, this is a song that never goes into like just a chugging riff. It has like abrasive parts, but it still stays in this like higher key than most of their songs. Then in the middle, it breaks down into a segment where Darren starts singing, "Crack pipes, needles, PCP, and fast cars kinda mix pretty well in a dead movie star. When I feel like talking, I'll never be wrong." So all of a sudden, it's this like sunglasses guy on a motorcycle song that sounds like the seedy, dark streets of Los Angeles out of nowhere. And then that gets fused with the other song, and it's like a back and forth between these two very different song ideas that somehow cohere perfectly. And it's the ultimate, like, every part of System of a Down that doesn't even seem like it should go together, but somehow it does. And it's one of my favorite songs by the band because of all that. Besides those, we've got the midsection of the album. Things get a little bit more serious with Tentative, which is more of a political song where he's singing "No one saved us, no one's gonna save us now." It's this like really ruthless kind of song. And I will say, out of their more serious songs, this isn't one of the best. It's alright, it's fine. I like Holy Mountains a bit more, which comes up a few tracks later, which is a 5-minute epic song that, you know, is clearly themed around, again, the Armenian genocide. But it hits this big, huge stride, and it actually sounds like a mountain. Like, the song is called Holy Mountains, and the way it progresses is like climbing a mountain. Kind of reminds me of a similar song by Ensiferum from their first album, which also Treacherous Gods, which is also about climbing the highest mountain. Like, both of them have this climbing feel to them, but I really love the part in this song where it breaks down and they start screaming like, "Lawyer, killer, demon, back to the river I rest." Again, doing the syncopation thing, but in a very powerful way. Dope ass song, but not one of my favorites on the album. You Fig, this is kind of almost one of their like short goofy songs, because it's got the chorus is really silly, because it's like, all pathetic flag waving ignorant geeks, and we'll eat 'em, eat 'em, eat 'em, eat 'em, eat 'em, eat 'em, eat 'em. And it's like the super fast vocals are goofy, but they're mixed with this really heavy verses that sound arid. Like, he's screaming about melting in the sun, and it sounds like melting in the sun. It's an interesting track. It does a very severe, quiet, and loud thing in the breakdown section. It's cool. It's not my favorite on the album, but it is a cool track that I'm glad exists. But to get into the real meat of this, the last 4 songs are where this album really takes off and becomes incredible. First, you've got Vicinity of Obscenity, which by far is my favorite of all the shorter, sillier System of a Down songs. It's a song about jacking off, and it sounds seedy. It sounds dark. It's got these really, really memorable riffs and lyrics where he's going, banana, 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 terracotta, terracotta, bye. Is there a perfect way of holding you, baby? And then you hear these, like, these shrill voices that sound like simultaneously like women and babies, like a plant in a Disney movie or something going, wow. And it's such a eerie sound, and there's like these sex moans towards the back end of the song that are like all warped and distorted and hanging in the background, and all these other voices, and the song's just creepy. It's really interesting, and but it has these like breakdowns in the middle of it where it'll go into like a dance thing once again, but like a jazz dance thing, like almost a lounge music sound, but with all these weird little voices. It's super cool. It's one of my favorite System of a Down songs once again, and easily the best of their silly songs. Then we get into She's Like Heroin, and this one is like a film noir track, but like a upbeat, fun film noir. Like, the whole song has these very plucky guitar chord progressions, and Darren taking center stage as the vocalist, just kind of singing about selling ass for heroin and being addicted to heroin, so you start selling ass. And it, again, combines funny with epic in a way, and it ends in a really sad way, because the mid part of the song, he's singing like, selling ass for heroin, ass, selling ass for heroin, and it seems funny, but then there's this really somber chord progression at the end, and the vocals get more and more sad until it's, she's like heroin, sipping through a little glass, I'm looking for some help, I need someone to save my ass. It's sad, and that transitions you nicely into Lonely Day. Now, Lonely Day is a difficult song to judge, because it is a very corny ballad, but it's like epic and feelsy. It kind of reminds me of like a My Chemical Romance song, like Helena or something, but the chorus is, the most loneliest day of my life, which is not English. The most loneliest day of my life. And I mean, the band's called System of a Down, but like, the most loneliest day of my life. And the lyrics are very like straightforward and dumb, and obviously on purpose. Like, he sings like, such a lonely day, should be banned. It's a day that I can't stand. It's the most basic shit, but at the same time, extremely relatable. If you're having a lonely day, this song is your lonely day, and it's got probably the best guitar solo that Darren ever put together on it. It's a really emotional guitar solo. This song makes me feel. I don't know what to tell you. It's the most broad, general song with a 4-chord progression, but it makes me feel. It's totally effective for being what it is. And it goes into the crushing closing track, Soldier Side. Soldier Side is a masterpiece. Probably one of, if not the best, System of a Down songs. I'd put it up there with Chop Suey. Those are like kind of neck and neck. It's like the best song they ever wrote. And Soldier Side is just this utter dirge. The chord progression is haunting. The guitars are just so like, they're fucking take the life out of you. And there's these tremolo picked segments in the background just hanging there that this sounds like a funeral procession. And I mean, at parts it is describing a funeral procession, and it's just describing like the depression of young men going off to die in war, and the lyrics chosen are highly evocative. Young men standing on the top of their own graves, wondering when Jesus comes, are they gonna be saved? It's a song that uses religion without really criticizing it. It's like saying, you know, it's suggesting that Jesus won't save them, but it sincerely begs the question. Like, the song is very sincere. It doesn't feel glib. It doesn't feel patronizing. It's like legitimately saying, like, this is what these young men are experiencing as they stand on their own graves, wondering, will God save them? And it just goes further and further down this dark rabbit hole until the reprisal of Soldier Side, the intro song from Mesmerize, which is a gorgeous reprisal. It really fucking bookends the double album incredibly well. And they're screaming, welcome to the Soldier Side, where there's no one here but me. Ooh, the melody just drips with pathos. It's so fucking good. It closes out the album in a beautiful way. It's another song that starts heavy and ends epic, and it's probably the best of those. So yeah, that's my favorite System of a Down album. I literally just reviewed all of the System of a Down albums. This took a whole hour. This is not how you're supposed to do a worst to best video, but fuck it. I guess I just wanted to review all the System of a Down albums. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll probably do more of these in the future for whatever other bands. I've basically done one with Coheed and Cambria back on the Digibro After Dark channel, so I probably won't tackle that again, though it is quite tempting. I didn't do it in this format, but, you know, I did it. You can hear all my thoughts on the albums there. But, you know, maybe I'll tackle a band like the Mars Volta or the Deer Hunter or some other band that I'm really familiar with their whole catalog. Who knows? But, oh, leave suggestions if you like. I probably won't, like, try to suggest bands you know I listen to, because I'm not going to dive into some band I don't listen to for the sake of a video. Like, I'm semi-taking requests on this channel. If it's a request that I'm already interested in doing, I will definitely do it. But, you know, I'm not just going to, like, pick up some new album just to review it for you guys. Anyway, yeah, that's enough. Jesus Christ.